Obedience to unknown systems. You sit in a meeting while a dashboard number decides your budget, your schedule, and your approval chain, and nobody can explain how it was calculated. The cost is quiet, your judgment gets treated like noise, and the spreadsheet gets treated like law. People obey systems they do not understand because the output becomes a proxy for legitimacy, and the system rewards compliance more reliably than it rewards comprehension. A proxy is a substitute signal used when the real thing, quality, fairness, truth, competence, is expensive to measure directly. Start with the basic shape of technological authority, opacity plus consequences. In many organizations, the system sits behind a screen. Models, scoring rules, automated cues, risk labels, priority flags. Most people do not see the assumptions, the training data, the thresholds, the error bars. But they do see the approvals, the denials, the escalations, the audit trails. Power arrives as an interface. There is an explicit constraint that forces obedience: time. Time is the most common scarcity in a bureaucratic and technical environment. You have 10 requests, 5 stakeholders, 3 checklists, and a deadline. Under that constraint, understanding the system competes with finishing the work. The system offers a cheaper path. Accept the output, move to the next task, avoid being the person who delays the pipeline. Then the incentives lock in. A manager is incentivized to reduce variance and justify decisions. A staff member is incentivized to avoid being singled out as non-compliant. A vendor or internal team is incentivized to present certainty. The system provides all of them a common shield. The process said so. That shield is not neutral. It redistributes responsibility. When a decision is contested, it is easier to defend a number than a judgment call. So the organization learns to route disputes away from humans and into procedures. Now add the feedback loop. The more a system is obeyed, the more its outputs become the training data for what normal looks like. Obedience produces the very patterns the system later claims to detect. Exceptions get squeezed out because exceptions are costly. Over time, the system appears more accurate, not necessarily because it is truer, but because reality is being shaped to fit its categories. Here is the trade-off that hides inside the promise of objectivity: scale versus nuance. You can process thousands of decisions quickly, or you can hold context patiently. You rarely get both. Automated scoring and standard checklists scale, but they flatten. Human review holds nuance, but it costs time, money, and conflict. The organization chooses the cheaper coordination tool, then calls that choice fairness because it is consistent. That is how proxy drift happens. A proxy begins as a tool and becomes a target. Consider a generic productivity metric: tickets closed per day. At first, it's a rough indicator of throughput. Then it becomes a performance number tied to bonuses, promotions, staffing. People respond rationally. They close easy tickets, split work into smaller units, avoid complex cases, or write updates that satisfy the checklist without improving the outcome. The metric rises while the real goal, solving the customer's problem, stagnates. The system interprets the proxy as success, and success triggers more reliance on the proxy. Authority in technological societies is often just this: a set of constrained humans outsourcing judgment to proxies because proxies are auditable, repeatable, and fast. The system does not need to be understood to be obeyed. It only needs to be connected to the levers that control access, status, and delay. This is not merely a story about machines. It is a story about attention and responsibility. When the dashboard becomes the center of attention, the human capacity for interpretation becomes secondary. People stop asking what the number represents and start asking how to survive the number. Meaning erodes quietly in that shift. The work becomes less about serving a person or building a craft, and more about satisfying a gate. The organization learns to value what is legible to the system, and to ignore what is important but hard to encode: mentorship, safety, long-term resilience, dignity, and exceptions. Power concentrates wherever the proxy is defined, tuned, and enforced. And because the proxy looks objective, the capture is harder to see. Obedience, then, is not weakness. It is adaptation to incentives. But adaptation has an externality. When everyone treats outputs as reality, fewer people remain who can name the difference between the metric and the mission. A disciplined moment of reflection can be as plain as naming the exchange being made. In your own environment, one metric is being served: response time, utilization, error rate, completion percentage, satisfaction score, compliance count. Alongside it sits one value that may be getting erased: patience, truthfulness about uncertainty, care for edge cases, learning, courage to escalate, respect for human context. Hold those two nouns side by side: the proxy you serve and the value it pushes off the dashboard. Notice where power is located: in the definition, in the thresholds, in the exceptions, in who gets to revise the model, and who is permitted to question it without penalty. Incentives do not require understanding, they only require consequences, and restraint begins where the proxy stops pretending to be the whole.